The kitchen was cold. It was that specific hollow cold of 2:17 a.m. that settles into the drywall and radiates out like a low-grade fever. I sat at the round oak table, the one my father had sanded down and refinished 40 years ago, surrounded by the physical debris of my life. To anyone else, it looked like paperwork. To me, it looked like an autopsy. There was the hum of the refrigerator, a Kenmore I'd bought in 2018, and the relentless ticking of the wall clock. And then there was the sound of my own breathing, shallow and ragged, the breathing of a woman who has just realized the water is rising faster than she can bail. I held a red pen in my right hand, hovering over the ledger I had ignored for 6 months. Denial is a powerful anesthetic. I'm a nurse. I know how people ignore the lump, the cough, the irregular mole. I had done the same thing with my bank account. I had treated my finances like a patient I was afraid to diagnose because I knew the prognosis was terminal. But tonight, the anesthesia had worn off. I looked at the number circled at the bottom of the projection sheet, negative $42,350. That wasn't debt I currently had. That was the projected deficit by the time I turned 68. I ran the calculation again, tapping the keys of the oversized calculator, the plastic clicking loudly in the silent house. Pension, Social Security, 401k withdrawals, then the expenses. Mortgage, property taxes, utilities, food, medications, and finally, the miscellaneous family support column. I stared at the paper until the numbers blurred. If I continued on this trajectory, if I continued being the good sister, the saint, the rock, I would lose this house in 7 years. I closed my eyes and I saw it, not a metaphor, but a literal vision. Me, Evelyn Vance, 68 years old, with arthritic knees, sleeping in the back seat of my Toyota Camry because I couldn't afford a studio apartment. I saw myself washing my face in a gas station sink. I saw the look in the clerk's eyes, pity mixed with disgust. My stomach turned over, a hard, violent lurch. I pushed the chair back and walked to the sink, gripping the porcelain edge until my knuckles turned white. How? I whispered to the empty room. How did I let it get this bad? But I knew how. It didn't happen with an explosion. It happened with a slow leak. It was the death of 1,000 cuts, and I had handed the knife to the people I loved most. To understand the math, you have to understand the mythology. In the Vance family, I was the responsible one. I was the eldest. I was the one who went to nursing school, who maxed out her retirement contributions, who drove a sensible car and paid her credit card bill in full every month. My sister, Brenda, was the free spirit. That's the polite term we used at Thanksgiving. The clinical term would be impulsive, financially illiterate narcissist. But you don't call your sister that, not when you love her. And I did love her. I loved her with a fierce, protective instinct that had been drilled into me since we were children. Look after Brenda, Evelyn. She's sensitive. She needs you. I remembered a Tuesday 3 months prior. It was the perfect distillation of our dynamic. I had just come off a 12-hour shift at St. Jude's. My feet were throbbing, swaddled in compression socks, and my back felt like someone had taken a hammer to my lumbar spine. I was looking forward to a frozen lasagna and a glass of cheap Merlot when my phone rang. It was Brenda. I shouldn't have answered, but the conditioning is deep. It's a reflex. Evie, her voice was high, breathless, the crisis voice. What's wrong, Bren? I asked, turning off the ignition but leaving the keys in. It's the landlord. He's being such a prick. He says if I don't have the remaining $600 by tomorrow, he's starting the eviction process. Can you believe that? Over $600 after I've been such a good tenant? I rubbed my temples. I knew for a fact Brenda was not a good tenant. She played loud music, she tried to sneak a cat into a no-pet building, and she was chronically late with rent. Brenda, I said, my voice heavy with fatigue, I just gave you $400 last month for the car repair, the alternator. I know, and I'm going to pay you back, I swear. But this is eviction, Evie. He's going to throw my stuff on the street. Where am I going to go? I can't come live with you. I know you like your space. The hook was baited. She knew exactly where to cast it. The threat of her moving in with me was a terrifying prospect, and she knew it. I don't have $600 lying around, I lied. I did have it. It was in my emergency fund, money meant for a new water heater or a blown tire. Please, Evie, I start that new catering gig next week. I'll have the money in 2 weeks. Please, I'm scared. She started to cry, not the silent weeping of true despair, but the loud, hyperventilating sobs of a child who wants a toy. Okay, I said. The word tasted like ash. Okay, I'll Venmo it. But this is it, Brenda. I mean it. You're the best, she sniffled, the tears vanishing instantly. You saved my life again. Love you. She hung up before I could say it back. I walked into my house, transferred the money, and ate my lasagna cold. It wasn't just Brenda. It was Jessica, her daughter, my niece. 2 days after the rent incident, Jessica dropped her 2 kids, Noah and Liam, at my door. Hey, Aunt Evie, shouted Jessica from her car window, the engine still running. Mom said you were off today. I got called into a shift at the salon, emergency cover. I'll be back at 6. She peeled out before I could tell her that I wasn't off. I was recovering. I had planned to do laundry, sleep, and maybe read a book. Instead, I spent 8 hours chasing 2 high-energy boys who were hungry, bored, and destructive. I ordered them pizza. I bought a movie on Prime for them to watch. I replaced the vase Liam broke. When Jessica returned at 7:30, 90 minutes late, she didn't apologize. She didn't offer money for the pizza. She looked at the messy living room and sighed. Wow, they were wild today, huh? Thanks, Aunt Ev. You're a lifesaver. Mom's right. You really are the rich aunt. She laughed as she buckled them in. The rich aunt. I looked at my reflection in the hallway mirror that night. I saw gray roots I was delaying dyeing to save $50. I saw a sweater I'd owned for 8 years. I wasn't rich. I was just the only one who wasn't bleeding out. So I thought. The breaking point didn't come with a bank statement. It came with a slip. It was a Saturday, 3 weeks ago. I was cleaning the gutters. I know a 62-year-old woman shouldn't be on a ladder, but hiring someone cost $150, and after the loan to Brenda and the pizza for the boys, I was trying to be frugal. It had rained the night before. The aluminum rungs were slick. I was reaching for a clump of wet leaves when my foot slid. It happened in slow motion. The loss of gravity, the sky spinning, the realization that I was falling. I hit the ground hard. The sound was the worst part. A wet, sickening crack that echoed inside my own skull. Pain, white-hot and electric, shot up my left leg. I gasped, sucking in air, but my lungs had seized. I lay in the wet grass, staring up at the gray sky, my vision tunneling. "Help!" I croaked. But I live on a large lot, set back from the road. My neighbors were at work. I tried to move my leg and screamed. The ankle was bent at an angle that defied anatomy. I lay there for 10 minutes, shivering, fighting off shock. My phone was in my back pocket. I maneuvered my hand under my hip, whimpering with every shift of my body, and pulled it out. The screen was cracked, but it worked. Who do you call? I didn't call 911 immediately. I was worried about the ambulance cost. My insurance deductible is high. I thought, if someone can just drive me to the ER, I can save $2,000. I called Brenda. She picked up on the second ring. I heard laughter in the background, clinking glasses. Brenda? My voice was unrecognizable, thin, wet, trembling. Hey, we're just ordering apps. What's up? Bren, I fell. What? I fell off the ladder. My ankle. I think it's broken. Badly. I'm in the yard. I can't get up. There was a pause. The laughter in the background continued. Someone shouted, "Get the nachos!" "Oh my God, Evie, are you serious? Did you call an ambulance?" "No, I gritted my teeth as a wave of nausea rolled over me. "I need a ride. I can't afford the ambulance. Can you come, please? It hurts." "Evie, I'm in the city. We're at brunch for Kelly's birthday. I can't just leave. I drove everyone." I stared at the clouds. A single bird flew across my field of vision. "Brenda, I'm lying in the dirt. My bone is sticking out." "Ew, don't say that." She sounded annoyed. "Look, you have money. Just call the ambulance or call an Uber. I really can't leave right now. Our food is coming. Call me when you get to the hospital, okay?" She hung up. The silence that followed was louder than the snap of my bone. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a revelation. I lay there, the cold dampness of the earth seeping into my clothes. I looked at the phone in my hand. I had paid her rent. I had paid for her car. I had bailed her out of bad relationships, bad investments, and bad moods for 40 years. I had set myself on fire to keep her warm, and when I struck a match for help, she blew it out because her nachos were coming. I dialed 911. "I need an ambulance," I said, and for the first time in my life, I didn't care what it cost. The emergency room at St. Jude's, my own workplace, is a different world when you're horizontal. I knew the triage nurse, Sarah. Her eyes went wide when they wheeled me in. They cut my jeans off, my favorite pair. I remember thinking, that's another $40 gone. The hours that followed were a blur of morphine, x-rays, and the heavy plaster weight of a cast. A trimalleolar fracture, 3 breaks, surgery required. I lay in the recovery bay around 8 p.m. The pain was a dull throb now, muffled by chemicals. I checked my phone. One text from Brenda. "How's the leg? Brunch was crazy, LOL. Hope you're okay." No call, no visit. Jessica hadn't texted at all. I looked around the room. In the bed next to me, a young woman was holding the hand of an elderly man who looked like he'd had a stroke. She was stroking his hair, whispering to him. That's love, I thought. Love is presence. Love is showing up. I closed my eyes and the ledger appeared in my mind again. But this time, the columns weren't just financial. I had treated my family like an investment. I thought if I poured enough love and money into them, I was building equity. I thought I was buying future care. I thought when I am old, when I am hurt, they will be there because I was there for them. I was wrong. I hadn't been building a safety net. I had been feeding a parasite. A parasite doesn't love the host. It doesn't care if the host is in pain. It only cares that the host is still warm enough to feed from. The realization made me feel colder than the winter air outside. I was 62. I was alone. And I had wasted my life buying the affection of people who would let me rot in my backyard rather than skip brunch. Getting home was the final indignity. They discharged me at 11 p.m. I couldn't drive. My car was still in the driveway. I didn't call Brenda. I didn't call Jessica. I called a Lyft. The driver was a young man named Ahmed. He helped me into the back seat with more tenderness than my sister had shown me in a decade. We pulled up to my house, and it was dark. I had left the porch light off in my rush to clean the gutters. The house loomed in the darkness. Usually, when I looked at my home, I saw a sanctuary. I saw the garden I planted. I saw the porch where I drank my coffee. Tonight, as I struggled out of the lift, balancing on one good leg and 2 aluminum crutches, I didn't see a home. I saw an asset. I saw a structure that required taxes, insurance, and maintenance. I saw the only thing standing between me and the street. I thanked Ahmed and tipped him $20 I shouldn't have spent. I crutched my way to the front door, the rubber tips slipping slightly on the concrete. I unlocked the door and stepped into the silence. It was deafening. I moved to the kitchen. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. I only turned on the stove hood lamp. I sat down at the table. My leg was throbbing, a deep, bone-deep ache. But my mind was crystal clear. I pulled the ledger toward me. I opened it to a fresh page. I picked up the red pen. For years, I had been calculating how much I could afford to give them. I had been asking, can I spare this? Tonight, the question changed. Tonight, the question was, what is the cost of keeping them? I looked at the projection, homeless by 68. I looked at my cast. I uncapped the pen. The tip bled red ink onto the paper. No more, I whispered. I wasn't just a nurse anymore. I was a surgeon, and I had a gangrenous limb to amputate. I started writing. I didn't write numbers this time. I wrote a plan. The phone buzzed on the table. It was Jessica. "Hey, Auntie Evie. Sorry I missed the news about your leg. Bummer. Anyway, Noah has a soccer tournament in 2 weeks and the team fees are due. It's $250. Can you help? He really wants to play." I stared at the message. The entitlement oozed off the screen. $250. My grocery budget for 2 weeks. I didn't reply. I turned the phone over, face down. I looked back at my ledger. I had $42,000 to find in my budget to save my retirement, and I knew exactly where I was going to find it. The morning sun hit the kitchen table at a sharp, unforgiving angle, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It was a Tuesday, 3 days after the fall. I was sitting in the same chair, my left leg propped up on a spare stool, the heavy fiberglass cast itching fiercely around my shin. A bottle of oxycodone sat next to my coffee mug, unopened. I needed clarity, not comfort. On the table, the ledger was gone. In its place was a laptop, a stack of bank statements going back 5 years, and a magnifying glass. I felt less like a nurse and more like a forensic pathologist conducting an autopsy on a murder victim. The victim was my future. I had spent the last 48 hours doing something I hadn't done in decades. I was tracing the money, not just the big checks, but the little trickles, the $20 here for gas, the $50 there for groceries. When you look at them individually, they are kindnesses. When you look at them in a spreadsheet, they are a hemorrhage. I was looking for one transaction in particular. 2 months ago, Jessica had called me in tears. She said her brakes were grinding metal on metal. She said she was terrified to drive Noah and Liam to school. She needed $850 for parts and labor. I had transferred it immediately, my heart pounding with worry for my great-nephews. I found the transfer on the statement. March 14th, outgoing $850. I opened a new tab on my browser. I didn't have an Instagram account, or at least Jessica didn't think I did. I had created a burner account years ago to keep an eye on a rebellious teenage patient, and I had never deactivated it. I typed in Jessica's handle and scrolled down to March. There were no photos of a mechanic's shop. There were no posts complaining about car trouble. But on March 16th, 2 days after the transfer, there was a carousel of photos. The location tag read, "The Mirage Hotel and Casino, Las Vegas." The first photo was Jessica holding a yard-long margarita, wearing a dress that likely cost $200. The caption read, "Sometimes a mama just needs a break. #girls trip, Vegas baby, self-care." I clicked the arrow. The next photo was her at a spa, cucumbers on her eyes. The next was a table full of expensive sushi. I sat back in my chair, the air leaving my lungs in a slow hiss. The physical sensation was distinct. It wasn't anger initially. It was a cold, hollow ache in the center of my chest. It wasn't the money. $800 was a lot, but I could survive losing it. It was the lie. She had used my fear for her children's safety to fund a weekend of hedonism. She had weaponized my love for those boys. She had looked me in the eye, heard the panic in my voice when I asked if the car was safe, and she had calculated exactly which buttons to press to open my wallet. I wasn't a family member to them. I was a resource. I was a vein of gold they were mining until it ran dry. I took a screenshot of the photo and printed it out. The colors came out slightly streaky, Jessica's tan skin turning a sickly orange, but the timestamp was clear. I placed the paper on the stack of bank statements. My hands were steady. The trembling from the hospital was gone. In its place was something harder, something calcified. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had been avoiding for 5 years. Main Street Financial, this is Robert. Robert, I said, it's Evelyn Vance. I need an appointment, today. Robert Henderson was a man who wore suspenders without irony and looked at spreadsheets the way some men look at centerfolds. He had been trying to get me to increase my contributions for a decade. I sat in his office later that afternoon, my crutches leaning against his mahogany bookshelf. He looked at the papers I had brought, the ledger, the debts, the family outflow. He typed into his computer for 5 minutes without speaking. The silence was punctuated only by the aggressive clack of his mechanical keyboard. Finally, he stopped. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Evelyn," he said. He didn't use his customer service voice. He used his funeral director voice. "Give it to me straight, Bob." He turned the monitor toward me. There was a graph. A blue line representing my savings went up, plateaued, and then starting about 7 years ago began a steep, jagged decline. It hit the x-axis, 0, and kept going into the red. I call this the death date. He pointed to a specific point on the grid, June 14th, 2030. I stared at the date, 4 years from now. On that day, Bob continued, his voice devoid of emotion, your liquid assets will be 0. You will have to sell the house. After the capital gains and the market shifts, the proceeds from the house will last you another 3 years in a rental. By 2033, you will be entirely dependent on Social Security, which will cover approximately 40% of your current living expenses. He leaned forward, clasping his hands. You are setting yourself on fire to keep them warm, Evelyn. And the tragedy is, they're not even cold. They're just too lazy to put on a sweater. I know, I whispered. Do you? He tapped the paper where I had listed the loans to Brenda. This isn't a loan, Evelyn. A loan implies an intent to repay. This is a gift, a $40,000 gift over 5 years. If you stop this today, right now, this second, we can save the house. It will be tight. You'll have to be frugal, but you won't be destitute. He looked me in the eye. But if you signed one more check, just one, you are choosing poverty. You are choosing to be a burden on the state because God knows these 2 women won't take you in. It was the brutality I needed. It was the defibrillator shock to my stopped heart. What do I do? I asked. You cut the cord, Bob said, and you do it before they drain the last drop. The test came sooner than I expected. I was back home, staring at the printed photo of Jessica in Vegas when the phone rang. It was Brenda. Evie, how's the leg? Her voice was vibrating with that manic, breathless energy that always preceded a sales pitch. Brenda was addicted to opportunities. Over the years, she had sold Tupperware, essential oils, leggings that ripped after 2 washes, and dubious vitamin supplements. It's healing, Brenda. What's going on? Okay, so don't say no until you hear me out. This is it, Evie. This is the one. I met this woman, Sharon, at the brunch, the one I was at when you called, and she's a diamond executive with New Life. It's not just vitamins, it's biohacking. It's huge in Europe. I closed my eyes. Brenda? No, listen, Sharon says I have the perfect energy for this, but to buy into the Founders Circle, which is where the real passive income is, I need to buy the inventory up front. It's an investment in my future, in our future. If I do this, I can pay you back everything I owe you within 6 months. Sharon showed me the math. How much? I asked. My voice was flat. 10,000. The silence stretched. $10,000. That was a third of what I had left in my liquid savings. That was a new roof. That was 2 years of property taxes. 10,000, I repeated. I know it sounds like a lot, but the return on investment is 300% in the first quarter. Evie, please, I'm tired of struggling. I want to be independent. I want to help you. Imagine I pay for a nurse for you so you don't have to hobble around. The irony was so sharp it almost drew blood. She wanted my money to pay for a nurse that I was because she couldn't be bothered to help me herself. I can't discuss this over the phone, I said. Does that mean maybe? It means come over for dinner on Sunday. Bring Jessica, bring the boys. I'll make a roast. We'll look at the numbers. Oh my God, Evie, you won't regret this. I'm going to change our lives. Yes, I said, looking at the Vegas photo. I believe you are. Sunday arrived with a heavy gray sky. I spent the morning prepping. I didn't just prep the food, I prepped the battlefield. I roasted a beef tenderloin, expensive and tender. I made the garlic mashed potatoes Jessica loved. I set the table with the good china, the pattern with the gold rim that I usually saved for Christmas. But I also set up the sideboard. Next to the water pitcher, I placed a manila folder. Inside were the bank statements, the projection form Bob Henderson had given me, and the photo of Jessica in Vegas. They arrived at 5 p.m. with a whirlwind of noise. Brenda was wearing a new scarf, silk, designer knockoff, and carrying a bottle of wine that I knew cost less than $7. It smells amazing in here, Brenda chirped, kissing my cheek. She didn't ask about my leg. She walked right past my crutches to the kitchen counter. So, I brought the brochures for New Life. Wait until you see the packaging. It's so premium. Let's eat first, I said. I was standing by the oven, balancing on my good leg. I want everyone to be full before we talk business. Smart, Jessica said, flopping onto the sofa. I'm starving. Noah, turn the volume down. The dinner was a study in dissonance. The food was warm, comforting, the kind of meal that implies safety and continuity. The conversation was jagged. Brenda talked nonstop about downlines and residual income. Jessica complained about her ex-husband and how much Noah's soccer gear cost. They ate voraciously. They drank the wine. They didn't notice that I pushed my peas around the plate, taking only small sips of water. I was watching them. I was looking at their mouths, chewing the food I paid for. I was looking at their clothes bought with money I had lent them. I realized with a jolt that I didn't like them. I loved them, that biological imperative was still there, buried deep, but I didn't like them. They were shallow, selfish creatures who viewed me as a utility, a faucet. So, Brenda said, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin. She pushed her plate away. The roast was to die for, Evie, but can we talk about the check? Sharon needs the deposit by tomorrow morning to lock in the founder status. The air in the room changed. The fork chatter stopped. Even the boys seemed to sense the shift and lowered their iPads. Yes, I said. Let's talk about the check. I reached for my crutches and leveraged myself up. I moved to the sideboard and picked up the manila folder. I placed it in the center of the table right next to the gravy boat. I went to see a financial advisor on Tuesday, I said. My voice was quiet. I wasn't shaking. His name is Robert. He's very good with numbers. Brenda frowned, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. Okay, and did you ask him about the investment? Because these guys are old school, Evie. They don't understand the gig economy. He told me, I continued, ignoring her, that if I give you this $10,000, I will be bankrupt by the time I am 68. Don't be dramatic, Jessica scoffed, rolling her eyes. You have a pension. You have this huge house. I have a mortgage, I corrected her, and property taxes, and medical bills. Speaking of bills, I opened the folder. I pulled out the sheet with the highlighted transaction. Jessica, I said, do you remember the $850 you needed for brakes in March? Jessica stiffened. Her eyes darted to her mother, then back to me. Yeah? What about it? That car's a money pit. I was so worried about you, I said softly. I couldn't sleep thinking about you driving the boys on bad brakes. I pulled out the photo and slid it across the tablecloth. It stopped right in front of Jessica's wine glass. How were the brakes at the Mirage, Jessica? The silence that slammed into the room was absolute. Jessica looked at the photo. Her face went pale, then instantly flushed a deep, angry red. Brenda leaned over to look at it. What is this? Brenda asked. It's a photo from March 16th, 2 days after I transferred the money for the emergency repair. You went to Vegas. You stayed at a 5-star hotel. You drank $18 margaritas. You're spying on me? Jessica's voice wasn't apologetic. It was shrill. It was the voice of the aggressor. You created a fake profile to spy on me? That is sick, Evelyn. That is creepy. She has a point, Evie, Brenda chimed in, her shock pivoting instantly to defense. Spying on your family? That's low. I looked at them. I really looked at them. There was no shame, no stuttered apology, no I can explain, just immediate weaponized outrage. The brakes never existed, I said, just like the alternator didn't exist, just like the eviction threat was probably exaggerated. I needed a brake, Jessica shouted. She stood up, her chair scraping violently against the wood floor. I work my ass off. I'm a single mother. You sit here in this big house with your pension and you judge me for taking one weekend for myself? I judged you for stealing, I said. It wasn't stealing. You gave it to me. Under false pretenses, that is fraud. Oh, listen to her, Brenda laughed, a harsh barking sound. Fraud. You're talking like a cop. We're family. Family helps each other. God, you have become so bitter since you got hurt. You're turning into one of those miserable old women who hoards her money and dies alone. I'd rather die alone, I said, my voice dropping an octave, than die being eaten alive. I placed my hand on the ledger. The Bank of Evelyn is closed permanently. There will be no more $10,000 for New Life. There will be no more rent, no more car repairs, no more pizza money. Brenda's face twisted. The mask of the loving sister fell away completely, revealing the snarling desperation underneath. You can't do that. I promise, Sharon. I need this, Evie. You owe me. You owe me? I looked incredulously. For what? For being my family, for being the only people who give a damn about you. Who's gonna visit you when you're old, huh? Who's gonna bring the grandkids? You think you can just cut us off? We're your blood. You're not blood. You're a hemorrhage. Brenda stood up. She was shaking with rage. Come on, Jess, get the boys. We're leaving? Jessica asked, snatching her purse. We're not staying where we're not wanted. Let her keep her precious money. Let's see how warm it keeps her at night. Brenda leaned across the table, her face inches from mine. I could smell the cheap wine on her breath. You're going to regret this, Evelyn. You're going to call me begging to see us, and I'm going to remind you of this moment. I'm counting on it, I said. Brenda grabbed her coat. Let's go, now. She stormed toward the hallway. Jessica grabbed the boys by their arms, dragging them away from the table. "Grandma's right," she spat at me. "You're a selfish old witch." They marched to the front door. I didn't turn around. I sat at the head of the table, staring at the cooling roast beef. The front door opened. Then, with the force that shook the walls, it slammed shut. The framed picture of the three of us from Christmas 1998, hanging in the hallway, rattled against the drywall. Then, with a soft thud, it fell to the floor and the glass shattered. I didn't flinch. I sat in the silence. It wasn't the lonely silence of the hospital. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannons have stopped. I picked up my fork and took a bite of the roast beef. It was cold, but for the first time in years, I could taste it. The silence that followed the slamming of the front door was not empty. It was heavy, vibrating with the kinetic energy of their departure. On the floor, the shattered glass of the family portrait glinted under the hallway light. I stared at the jagged shards lying across the faces of my sister, my niece, and myself from a decade ago. It looked like a crime scene. In many ways, it was. I didn't move for a long time. My adrenaline, which had held me upright during the confrontation, drained away, leaving me trembling. I sank back into the chair, my cast heavy and cumbersome. I expected to feel relief. I had finally said the words. I had finally stopped the bleeding. But I didn't feel relief. I felt a crushing, suffocating panic. My phone, which I had placed face down on the table, began to buzz. It buzzed once, then again, then a continuous, angry vibration that rattled against the wood. I picked it up. "I hope you're happy. You just destroyed this family over money. Mom is rolling in her grave." "Don't expect us for Thanksgiving or Christmas. You want to be alone? Congratulations, you got your wish." "I can't believe you humiliated me like that. You are a sick, sad old woman." I read them, each message a physical blow. The conditioning of 40 years screamed at me to fix this. "Call her," the voice in my head whispered. "Apologize. Write the check. It's cheaper than this pain." But I didn't reply. I turned the phone off. I limped into the living room, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark. I didn't sleep that night. I listened to the house settling, wondering if the creaks were the sounds of my life crumbling or the sound of the foundation finally holding its own weight. The real weapon wasn't deployed until 3 days later. I had turned my phone back on. The barrage of insults had stopped, replaced by an eerie radio silence. I was in the kitchen making toast when a single message came through from Jessica. There was no subject line, just a photo. It was a picture of Noah and Liam, my great-nephews. They were holding hand-drawn pictures. Noah's drawing was of a stick figure woman with a red X over her face. Below the photo, the text read, "I told the boys that Auntie Evie doesn't love us anymore. I told them you chose your bank account over them. Noah cried for an hour. Since you don't care about family, you don't get the privileges of family. You are not to contact them. You are not to come to their school. You are dead to us. Goodbye." I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the linoleum. I sank to the floor, ignoring the sharp pain in my healing ankle. A guttural sob tore out of my throat. This was the nuclear option. They knew the money didn't hurt me enough, so they went for the heart. They took the only pure thing in my life, those boys, and used them as ammunition. The grief was a physical weight. It sat on my chest for weeks. The house felt cavernous. Every time I passed the spare bedroom where the boys used to stay with its bunk beds and toy chest, I felt a fresh wave of nausea. 2 weeks into the silence, I broke. It was a rainy Tuesday. The gloom was oppressive. I missed the noise. I missed the chaos. I convinced myself that I had been too harsh. "It's just money," I told myself. "You can't take it with you. Is $10,000 worth never seeing Noah grow up?" I reached for the landline to call Brenda. I had the speech rehearsed in my head. "I'm sorry. I was pain medicated. Let's start over. I'll write the check." As I reached for the phone, my hand brushed against my laptop. The screen woke up. It was still open to my banking portal. I froze. I hadn't looked at the account since the family council. I had been too depressed to care about the numbers. I leaned in. Checking balance $4,200. I blinked. I refreshed the page. Usually, by the 20th of the month, my balance was hovering around $400. Between the loans, the groceries, and the emergencies, my pension and salary would evaporate within days of deposit. But this month, the number was 4 digits. I clicked on the transaction history. Mortgage, paid. Utilities, paid. Credit card, paid in full. There were no withdrawals for Brenda rent, no transfers for Jessie car, no mystery charges for Uber Eats. For the first time in 10 years, my income had exceeded my expenses. I looked at the number, $4,200. Then I looked at the phone. If I picked up that receiver, that number would vanish, not just once, but every month forever, and along with it, my security would vanish, my dignity would vanish. I realized then that Jessica's text wasn't a punishment, it was a ransom note. Pay us or we kill the relationship. I looked at the bank balance again. It looked like a shield. It looked like freedom. I slowly pulled my hand away from the phone. No, I whispered to the rain battering the window. I won't pay the ransom. The shift didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, quiet thawing like the coming of spring. The cast came off in month 3. My ankle was stiff, but it held my weight. I started walking, at first just to the mailbox, then to the end of the block, then to the park. I joined the local gardening club. It was something I had wanted to do for years but never had time because I was always covering shifts to pay for Brenda's crises. At the first meeting, I met a woman named Susan. She was a retired teacher. We drank coffee, good coffee, not the instant stuff I used to buy to save money, and talked about hydrangeas. "You have such a lovely garden," Susan said. "You must have so much peace there." "I do," I said. And I realized it was true. The silence in my house changed. It stopped feeling like loneliness and started feeling like tranquility. I bought a new rug for the hallway to replace the one stained by the boys' muddy boots. I painted the guest room a soft yellow and turned it into a reading nook. I stopped dreading the ring of the phone. In fact, I changed my number. I gave the new one only to my doctor, Robert, and Susan. 6 months passed. My savings account hit $15,000. Robert told me that if I kept this up, the death date was gone. I would be solvent until I was 95. I was sleeping 8 hours a night. My blood pressure dropped. The knot of anxiety that had lived in my stomach for decades uncoiled. I realized I hadn't lost a family. I had lost a tumor. The final attempt happened in late August. I was in the front yard, deadheading the roses. The sun was warm on my back. I was humming. A car screeched into the driveway. It wasn't Brenda's car. It was a beat-up Honda I didn't recognize. Brenda got out. She looked terrible. Her roots were grown out, her face was puffy, and she was wearing sweatpants that looked days old. She didn't wave. She marched up the driveway. "You changed your number!" she screamed. I stood up, holding my shears. I didn't feel the old fear. I felt a detached curiosity. "Hello, Brenda." "Don't you hello me. Do you have any idea what you've done? Jessica is getting evicted, for real this time. She has nowhere to go." "She can get a job," I said calmly. "She has 2 kids, you selfish bitch. Those are your grandnephews. They're gonna be on the street." "They have a father," I said, "and Jessica is 34 years old. She is capable of working." Brenda stopped. She looked at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. The crisis voice wasn't working. The guilt trip wasn't landing. I need $5,000, Brenda said, her voice trembling with rage. Right now, or I swear to God, Evelyn, I will sue you. Sue me for what? For emotional distress, for abandoning us, for elder abuse, or reverse elder abuse. She was grasping at straws, desperate and incoherent. Get off my property, I said. What? I said, get off my property. If you don't leave in 1 minute, I am calling the police, and I will press charges for trespassing. Brenda's mouth fell open. She looked at the house she felt entitled to, the house she thought was her backup plan. Then she looked at me. She saw the gray hair, yes, but she also saw the straight spine. She saw the calm hands. She saw the eyes of a woman who had walked through the fire and come out made of steel. "You're a monster," she spat. "Maybe, but I'm a solvent monster. Goodbye, Brenda." She stood there for another 10 seconds, waiting for me to crack, waiting for the good sister to resurface. But the good sister was dead. I had buried her under the pile of unpaid receipts 6 months ago. Brenda turned around, got in the car, and peeled out of the driveway. I watched her go. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I turned back to my roses. There was a beetle on one of the leaves. I carefully brushed it off. "Not in my garden," I whispered. They tell you that family is everything. They tell you that blood is thicker than water, but they never tell you what to do when the blood is toxic. I am the villain in my sister's story. I know that. At Thanksgiving dinners where I'm not invited, they tell the story of Aunt Evelyn, the miser, the woman who chose her money over her own flesh and blood. They tell their friends that I am cold, that I am heartless. And I am okay with that, because in my story, I am the hero. I saved the woman who matters most. I saved the 68-year-old who would have been sleeping in a car. I saved my dignity. It cost me people I loved. I won't lie to you. The silence still hurts sometimes. I miss the idea of them. I miss who I wanted them to be. But I don't miss the panic. I don't miss the exploitation. If you are holding a ledger that bleeds red and you are afraid to cut the rope, let me tell you something. You can survive the loss of people who use you. You cannot survive the loss of yourself. I thought the war was over. I really did. But parasites are persistent. Yesterday, a certified letter arrived from a law firm I've never heard of. I tore the envelope open, expecting another bill or a plea. Instead, the bold letters at the top of the page stopped my heart. Notice of claim, adverse possession. My sister is claiming that because she stored her boxes in my garage for 10 years, she legally owns half my property. I stared at the paper, the disbelief turning into a cold, hard laugh. I picked up the phone to call my lawyer. The gloves are coming off.